Hey guys, Joker here. Today I want to talk to you guys about an anime movie and it's called Sword Art Online Progressive Aria of the Starless Night. Yes, is another SAO movie that was made last year around Christmas time, and there is also a second one that is going to be a continuation of this that I do not know when it is going to come out, but trailers for that movie have already come out and there's already a English dub for it. Yes, this movie does have an English dub. Unfortunately, other than the Blu-ray being available for you to purchase, I haven't really seen where you can watch it dub. I did saw that Crunchyroll has the movie, but I don't know if because I don't have a subscription, if it did not allow me to see if it had an English dub. Um, I do not know if Netflix or Hulu have it. I am aware that Funimation does not have it because I looked up there. I don't know if it is that I'm not able to see it because I don't have a subscription of theirs anymore. But I do know that if you have a website where you could watch the movie, then you'll definitely find it in English dub there. So this movie is an adaptation of the light novels that are named Sword Art Online Progressive. And of how I understand it, it's basically taking the events from the first arc of Aincrad, but filling in the pieces for some of the moments in that arc that get skipped. I don't know if you guys remember, but when I talked about this anime with Blind Toes in his channel, there were some moments where in the anime they get skipped, and I believe we mentioned it or we alluded to it, but with these light novels who got adapted into a manga, who then got adapted into movies, I believe, because there is a continuation of it that is going to be released sometime soon. I don't know when. All I know is that on Aniplex YouTube channel, they've already released 2 trailers or a couple of trailers for them. I don't know how many trailers they've released for the Japanese version, but I do know that for the English dub, there are 2 trailers already out, I believe. Or I don't know if it's just one in English dub and one in Japanese. You'll have to check to see. But basically of how I understand it, I believe this progressive arc is more to showcase the things that were skipped, to explain it a bit more, and I think to deep down more into Kirito's and Asuna's relationship. Because unlike with the anime where we clearly are seeing Kirito's point of view and we see the things that happen to him in the story, in the beginning we are seeing things from Asuna's perspective, and we get to see how she got into SAO, because she's not a gamer, and it turns out that she never got on Nerve Gear herself, and she never got the game itself. It turns out that her older brother, that we actually get to see in the movie, because in the anime it never really gets mentioned, but he is mentioned in the light novels of the main story. Of what I've read, he does get mentioned in those. So the movie kind of starts us from Asuna's perspective, and we get to see her going to school, getting good grades, the pressure from her mother, like we saw back in in the Rosario's mother arc, and basically just her having a lot of pressure, but she's very popular at school and is admired by all the other girls at school. But she has this one, I guess, close friend. She also gets top marks and it's like at the top of her class. But then in secret, this friend of hers is a gamer, and she's the type that doesn't like others knowing that she's a gamer, especially their classmates. And although Asuna isn't a gamer herself, they apparently do game against each other or together sometimes. So Asuna does have a bit of knowledge when it comes to gaming, but not a lot. And so we get a couple of scenes of them in school, them hanging out, playing, reminiscing of old stuff when SAO get mentions. Oh, I forgot that at the beginning we get a glimpse of some players testing the beta tester, which in the main storyline we never really get a glimpse of that. It just gets mentioned from time to time, which I thought it was kind of cool that even though it was like a small glimpse, we get to see that. So then her brother was the one who originally was going to go into the game, but it turns out he has an overseas trip. I don't know how old he is, but based on some of the things that are mentioned, I assume he is older than Asuna, but I don't know how old he is, but I assume he's not in school anymore because they're talking about him going to an overseas trip. So I don't know. So he leaves and he hasn't realized that he left. So she goes to ask him something and enters his room, and then that's when she realizes that he already left for his trip. And so she, thinking that he's not gonna mind, she decides to use his nerve gear and his copy of SAO, and that's when we kind of get a glimpse of more of just her clueless and naivety when it comes to games that I know the main story does a good job of showing us, but I think this also gives us more of that, to the point that, you know, like we saw in the main like storyline, like the anime, she picks her first name as her username, and then instead of trying to, you know, make an avatar and make it different, she sees that there's an option to take a picture of herself and basically use her like face and body measurements as the avatar, and she sees that to be far more easier than, you know, creating your own avatar and looking different than what you look in real life. And so she then gets into the game and she tries to talk to an NPC as though they're an actual person, trying to find her friend because the friend had told her about the game and she wanted them to play it together. And then Asuna just gets freaked out because this like very buff looking dude tells her he is her friend, and then she kind of gives her the ins and out of like, don't call people by their actual names, try and use more like nicknames and things. And she begins to tell her about the game and just teach her a couple of things and how to do, kind of similar to how we saw in the main story Kirito do to Klein. And so there are some scenes that if you already watch the anime, or at least the first arc, Aincrad, that are going to be very familiar. or you're going to notice that you already know these scenes. Like we get a scene of Kayava showing up and explaining the death game, and basically, you know, telling them the whole spiel about his own world. If you die in the real world, I mean, if you die in the game, you die in the real world, and if the Revue gets removed from you in the real world, you die, which is the same explanation he gives in the main story. It's just this time we get to see Asuna's perspective and how she takes it, seeing her friend go back to normal. Although we do get to see some of the same reactions for some people. Like we don't see them, but you hear in the background the two guys that end up screaming to each other about like one not being a girl and the other one not being 17. There's at some point where we see Silica screaming, and that's something that gets shown back in the Einkride arc. We get a shot of Klein like also saying the lines that he says. I don't remember exactly what he says, but there's some moments and scenes where they're the same, and there's obviously some things that change. Instead of us seeing Kirito's side of things, because we've already seen it, or the the story of it like expects you, or you know, if you're reading the light novels or even the manga, like it expects you to already know that side of the story. So they just keep showing you Asuna and her friend Mito, who in the real world is called Mizune, if I'm remembering correctly. Sort of showing us Mito teaching Asuna how to survive the game, how to basically fight it. Asuna does have a moment where she breaks down and she doesn't think she can handle it, because at this point she's still a newbie. Like it's not until later on of them just grinding, training, and her gaining the skills that she starts becoming more the character that we see in the Einkrad arc, which is this very like confident swordswoman that has a lot of skills and she's able to fight no problem. But it's not until later that we see that, and at this point she is somebody that they don't have that much confidence in their surviving. They think they're going to die. They're scared. They don't eat. They just want to go home. And it was kind of refreshing to see that, in my opinion, because we are shown through the main story that she was never a full-on gamer like some of the other characters. So I thought it was very refreshing to seeing that side of her before we see the other side that we're more accustomed to. And so the two friends, they continue to grind. They do end up in the dungeon with the chest that is a trap that Kirito's party unfortunately ends up dying to. If anybody remembers the Midnight Cats, I believe it was, or Cat something, I can't remember exactly the name, but if you guys remember that episode with that party, they do end up, I believe, in that dungeon, and they end up seeing a party get killed. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure who it was that they saw getting killed. I think it was just a random party, but Asuna wanted to jump in, and Mito just basically wants her not to, and they kind of make a pact where like Mito's telling her that she's not going to be greedy like that, and she's going to always protect Asuna, and Asuna tells her, oh, I know you will, but oh boy. I think sometimes extreme circumstances show us how people sometimes can be, no matter their good intentions or where their hearts may be. And so we skipped a little bit further. They're getting more into their routines. They have more skills, and Mito is telling us, you know, which monsters will be okay, which ones they may be able to handle. And they end up in this forest, and they're going to fight this. I don't remember the names they gave them, but they said it was a plant eating. No, sorry, a plant man eating. It's like a plant that would basically eat them if they weren't careful. But she also explained that there was another monster that if they attacked it, it would release this like smoke, and it would alert like other monsters to come in, and they would be swarmed with like a number of monsters that would be impossible for the both of them to defeat. And so, taking this in mind, they continue to fight, and they're like doing well. But then Mito sees this rare like monster that you don't normally see there, and because she was one of the beta testers, she knows these things, and she wants to go after it because she knows that it drops a rare item. And so, seeing that Asuna has things covered, she goes after the monster and just fights it. But while she left Asuna to fend for herself, Asuna accidentally ends up attacking the monster that she told him not to. And then next thing we know, we see a swarm of monsters attacking them. Asuna completely, like a boss, I may add, ends up like defeating all of them kind of by herself. Almost. Not all, but almost. And Mito is trying to completely get to Asuna, but then at some point, seeing all the monsters and things, she becomes afraid and just like decides to just run away instead of helping Asuna like she promised she would. And in this moment, Asuna's thinking she's gonna die, and she keeps fighting, but then more monsters come, and as she's thinking it's the end, oh no, I am gonna die, who slips in to her rescue? None other than Jesus-kun. If you guys have never watched Annie Sims, you would not get that reference. But anyway, Kirito shows up. And I honestly, I rewinded a couple of minutes for a second time because I had a moment of, wait, did he just swoop in? Like did he just like, is she seeing him in the air and him jumping down? Like did he just flew in? And yes, he did. Like, I don't know, I'm not sure where he came from, but like in the frames that they show him, it looks like he's just like ends up like slashing the monster, then jumps down, because like she sees him in slow motion as if like, oh, my Prince Charming has arrived to rescue me. So he then proceeds to just beat all of the monsters that were left, because it's Kirito, and even though he's a solo player, apparently he can defeat all of the monsters with no problem. And then he gives her healing potions, gives her like a map, kind of offers to take her back to town, but then also gives her the option to just her returning to town by herself. And I believe that's the option they take, but it's implied that they don't really like like each other's names or something, or I don't know if he like didn't get a quick glance of like her name, but he just leaves, and Asuna just remains devastated, and now thinking that her friend basically betrayed her, vows to just not let the game kill her, and she decides to more recklessly than what Kirito does. she decides to become a solo player herself and like completely just go killing monsters. But she does it to a point where like she doesn't return to town to get like healing potions or equipment or to fix her equipment, and she even admits to Kirito because they end up after that they end up meeting again, and she's kind of like exhausted, and he's I found this very interesting. He ends up like reprimanding her, but I believe it's because he's seeing some similarities with her, where like I think he realizes that like if you do this solo but you take too much of a risk by doing things recklessly and not really thinking, you could end up in a just making a bunch of mistakes that could cost you your life. And he's trying to like caution her out of doing it, but she really doesn't want to hear it and ends up passing out. And then like he brings her back to town and they end up having an argument about it because like she really didn't want his help, and he I did love that like they didn't really try and push this aspect of the relationship of like, oh, you know, just, or you know, the helplessness of her being a girl of like, oh, I just, you know, I helped you out because I wanted to, or because, you know, you're a girl and you need to be protected, because that just really doesn't seem like Kirito's personality towards like strangers or when he meets people for the first time, out of like basic like necessities and making sure that they don't die. So I did like that he decided to be honest with her and just basically told her like, oh, I just saved you because the map data she had, because he's like, you told me you've been in there for like a couple of days, so like I want that map info. And she's kind of like done with him. I don't know. I love the dynamics of the relationship before they start getting close to each other, as well as when they get close to each other. But there's something about the relationship at the beginning where he's kind of like, he's being nice to her because, you know, his personality is that he, if asked or if he like sees you in trouble, he does help, but doesn't really go out of his way of like having to, or if he does, then he'll do it with a bit of an ulterior motive, although not very malicious, which I think is something realistically that people in the real life will do. Well, yeah, sometimes they may help people and they may do it wanting something in return, but it may not be sometimes, you know, very, very malicious. And they are in a video game, so even though it's, you know, life or death, you could argue that like some of these players are still seeing it as a game, so they may still like, you know, help out each other or help out people wanting things in return to level up. But anyway, so we get that exchange between them, and then he is basically telling her that, oh, there's gonna be a meeting of a raid for the final box of the first floor, which I found it very interesting because it, again, you know, back to the main storyline, if you guys remember, when they first meet is at the meeting for the raid boss, not before they go to do that. So it's very interesting that that's the route that this story is going for. So again, this part of the movie goes very similar to how that episode went in the main story, which is Diablo, or is it Diago? I'm pretty sure it was Diablo. I am not sure how the name was supposed to be pronounced, but I know if it's visually, he's the guy with the I think, blue hair. And for any auditory feedback, he's the guy that says, in this game, I hold the job of knight. So, that character. And he's talking about how his party found the first floor's boss and trying to get everybody on the same page to start strategizing. Then we get Kibo. He goes off in a whole speech about how beta testers are bastards because they left us all newbies to die, and how they need to apologize to all the players that died and give them all their possessions and money. Then Egil shows up. He's the beautiful black man, which in my opinion deserves more screen time in the anime. But he also confirms, what he's asking, shows the guidebook, and then mentions how everybody gets those guidebooks for free at the item shop, and how it details all of the attacks from like monsters and things. So the beta testers are in a way still looking out for them, and how those players still die. And then once they're all in the same page, Diablo, however his name is, continues with the meeting and the things they have to do, and basically says that they'll have to form parties of 6. And Asuna and Kirito obviously get left out, and so Kirito asks Asuna to join his party, and basically just telling her, it's just for this one time. And it's kind of interesting to seeing Asuna being the one to sort of like hesitate before agreeing, because usually Kirito's the one trying to hesitate and not agree to join any party. So I don't know, it seemed very interesting to me seeing some of those dynamics like change between the two. And then they form the party, and let's see, some time passes. We get another shot that's very similar to the anime, which is them at night. Hasuna's eating. She has her red cloak thing over her, kind of hiding her face. He sits next to her to eat. Then he gives her the cream to dip in the bread. And this time I noticed, I believe, because animation has improved more than back in the 2012s when SAO, like that anime first came out. So I noticed that there was more of a animation to like Asuna's facial expression in the light over the cream and the bread. But she still says that famous line of like, I didn't came to town to eat tasty food, which a lot of people on the anime had criticized because of just some things she does later on. But they have that exchange. Then we see that Kirito's actually inviting her to talk about their strategy and how they should maneuver things before the fight. Asuna doesn't want to do it out there. He suggests like maybe like a bar and inn, and she still doesn't agree because she doesn't want people seeing them and getting the wrong idea. And then he mentions how he's renting like a bar and thing from like an NPC, and when he starts bragging about how like he has a lot of milk, a huge bed, the view, as soon as he mentions like that has a bath, Asuna just pounces on him and kinda demands to be brought to the bath, but then decides to have manners and asks if she can use it. It was just funny how she went from like demanding to then like asking politely. But Kirito completely agrees. They go over to his place. We get Another moment of those like animated facial expressions of her getting all like goo goo eyes and like oh my god sort of moments. And she takes her bath. She's kind of reminiscing, talking that if she died the next day, she would have no regrets. Although she would miss the bread with the cream, and then she comes out and kind of questions Kate, because I guess he was in the corner of the room and just asked her how her bath went, and she's saying that she's lurking, but apparently he was making tea for them. And then they start talking about their strategy. He gives her a better weapon. And it's interesting that he gives her a rapier that he had found from like an item drop, and he didn't really need it, so he was like, here, you can have it. And then they go to a blacksmith, and she's questioning why he's doing all of this for her, and he tells her for like a second time, it's better if you're better equipped for battle. And then he's like, and I don't want any of my party members to die, which, knowing some of the things they go through, I couldn't help but like feel a ting of like sympathy and like an ache in my chest, because I see him constantly saying that, and it just reminded me of like his party dying, and the main reason why he is a solo player. So let's see what else happens. Oh yeah, so we then cut to a scene of them walking to the boss fight, and they're talking to themselves. If I remember correctly, in the main story, they end up doing their strategizing or going over again the strategizing while they're walking, which they start doing this again, but then they start talking about mundane stuff and just, I guess, normal, hypothetical stuff. I don't know, it seemed kind of like cheesy to, again, like, strengthen more the bond between the two. And so then they enter the boss, and the music is completely different, but the scene is kind of similar to that episode of that boss fight. And Diablo, however, blue-haired guy, however his name is, you see him giving the commands, telling people what to do. Kirito and Asuna start switching, they keep fighting, and everything's going well until that last moment where blue-haired guy tries to take on the boss fight towards the end because he wanted the rare item, and Kirito and then somebody else notices that the attack pattern is not going how it should have gone from the beta, and we see Kirito shouting, but instead of, I guess, not fully shutting out the line, this time we do see him completely shutting out first this wasn't in the beta, wait, like basically like we do actually see him like warning him to stay away, and sort of saying what the boss fight is changing into, different from the anime where, like, if I'm remembering correctly, he doesn't fully finishes like his warning until like the guy's like in the floor and he runs towards him, and they have a small moment where they talk, and Kirito realizes that he's the one that gave the guidebooks. We do get that in the scene too, but we don't really see them having that talk. It kind of like moves a little bit faster, and we just see him like telling Kirito that to finish the boss for their sake, and then he dies. Because I think the movie is, or the story is acknowledging that people watching this or reading it, like, they already know what happens in the majority of this. So it's just, like a bit of retelling but putting in gaps for other stuff, and that's why I think when it goes to retelling some things that it has already covered, it doesn't cover everything because it's already expecting you to know. And so then we again continue with a battle. Kirito and Asuna keep fighting. We get a bit of a difference where Mito apparently was there the whole time, and her and Asuna have a moment because way earlier in the movie, well, like, Kirito and Asuna were talking that night. She kind of told him what happened, and she was debating whether she was her friend or not, and Kirito basically began to tell her that, excuse me, at the end of the day, you know whether you guys were actual friends or not. And he began telling her how he had something kind of similar happen to him. And I thought, like because of the intonation of, like, him telling her, you know, the fact that your friend thought of you two beating the game together instead of just her, made me think that either one, he was alluding to back at the beginning when he had let Klein alone, or he was alluding to his party members, or it could be that he was alluding to both. I'm not sure, but he was alluding to some of those events because it seemed kind of like painful for him to talk about. So, but I don't know which one he could have been referring to, but most likely probably the thing with Klein when he just left him there because, like, he didn't think he could be responsible for more than one person to, like, clear the game. But I could be wrong. I don't know. I haven't read that far when it comes to the manga progressive, so I don't know if further along he does tell her, you know, what it was, or even if in the light novels that get mentioned. So I don't know if it's left for speculation or something, but they have that moment, and Mito's relieved because she thought that Asuna had died. And then at some point, Asuna's cloak gets blown off and her face gets revealed, similar to how that episode of the anime. And instead of Kirito sort of having the revelation of, like, oh, it's a girl, it's more of like, oh, it's her, like, remembering that it's a girl that he had saved earlier in the movie. And then they all pitch in to help out and then defeat the boss. And then towards the end, Kirito grabs the black cloak, just like he does in the main story, like in anime. And then again, we get another very similar scene, but this time Mito is there, which in the original she wasn't. But it's the same of, like, Kibo accusing Kirito of being a beta tester and more beta testers being over there, and how it's his fault that the blue hair guy died. This time I like that instead of him just staying quiet and taking the blame, he does tell Kibo that it's not his fault that the blue hair guy died. And I agree with Kirito. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it wasn't really Kirito's fault. I never understood why they try to put that blame on him, where it was obvious that the blue hair guy just wanted to defeat the boss to get the black coat item. Because I remember in the anime, when he's having that little talk with Kirito before he dies, they mentioned that, like, that he wanted that rare item. But the whole room erupts into a frenzy. They're telling, you know, the beta testers to come out, and then Mito was going to come out and tell the truth, but then Kirito decides to do his whole bullshit speech about him knowing more than them and having climbed to higher levels than than some of the other beta tester, which when I first watched this scene before reading the light novels, I always assumed he was exaggerating on some things. But I didn't realize how much the dude is exaggerating in that part. Like, I love how he says he got to levels high in some of the other beta testers when... Oh, no, wait, actually. No, wait, actually. Sorry, never mind. I just remember in the first episode, he mentions that he only got to level 8. So, yeah. Scratch the whole didn't realize. Yeah. So, oh, that's just his bullshit speech, as you can tell. But then they start calling him a beater. He puts on the cloak, and Mito and Asuna have another moment where Mito asks her if she's gonna come back to her party, and Asuna tells her no, and then she's actually gonna go with Kirito, because Kirito at the end sort of tells people, I'm gonna open a portal. If you want to come along, feel free to follow. But he says some more bullshit, I believe. I'm not sure. But then she follows after him, and it's very interesting that unlike in the main timeline where he tells her that she should join a guild and leave, he actually tells her, like, I told you not to follow me, and he reiterates the same thing he had told everybody else. And then they do have that little moment where she's questioning how he knew her name, and then they have that thing where she finally spots his name, and they had a bit of a laugh over there, and they continue on their journey together. And then we see, well, I don't think we see her. I think it's more that we hear I believe it's the info broker that we see Kirito talking to in the anime back in the episode after his, like the episode where his party, after his party dies and he's looking for that item to revive them. But I don't know if we see her or if it's that we just hear her, and then the movie ends. And there were some of these changes I find very interesting. Again, the fact that instead of them going their separate ways and then, you know, encountering each other again and being in a party together, they continue on their way, like together on their journey, and just, I guess it makes their like relationship make a little bit more sense in this in the moment of, like, I guess if you want it to romanticize it a little bit more. And I'm looking forward to the next movie that's coming out to see exactly what they're gonna show, what exactly is going to intake, and what we're going to see, and if we're going to see any of the more of the other characters such as Klein, more Egil, maybe Silica, and even Lisbeth. But we'll have to see. And I hope you guys like, comment, subscribe, and share it with your friends.